Welcome, Black Achievement Fund family, friends, everyone out there. This is class 4 of our Missing Pages of World History lecture series in honor of Dr. John Henrik Clarke. For those of you who are just now tuning in, the other classes are on our YouTube page, and all you need to do is go to YouTube, go to Black Achievement Fund, and put in Missing Pages, and you will begin to see all of the other videos related to this lecture series. All right, let me share my screen. Once again, the Missing Pages of World History refer to pretty much the entire period of human history, from the origins of humanity all the way up to the end of Black Pharaonic Kemet, or Black Egypt. When you look at the timeline, there are things that there's absolutely no one on the planet will refute. One is the fact that all human beings, our current species, originated on the continent of Africa over 200,000 years ago. The first major migrations out of the continent of Africa happened around 130,000 years ago, which means that for over 70,000 years, human beings lived on the continent of Africa and Africa alone. After you get around 64,000 BC, you get another major development. You get the development of the bow and arrow, which allows for greater hunting, which enabled man to begin the process of securing his and her place at the top of the food chain. 35,000 BC, you begin to see the Neanderthals arrive on the scene in Eurasia. During this period, the Africans who left the continent and moved into Eurasia encountered these Neanderthals. When they encountered these Neanderthals, they interbreeded with those Neanderthals. So much so that today, in 2022, all non-African people have between 4 and 9% Neanderthal DNA. Non-African people. When we talk about world history, when we talk about the missing pages of history, when we talk about history in general, we must understand that we're talking about politics as well. When you talk about racism, when you talk about white supremacy, at the very heart of it is this item of missing history. What do I mean by missing history? In the United States of America, in every public school, history begins at two places. You have US history, which begins with the founding of America by Europeans. And then you have world history. And ironically, world history begins with Western civilization, as opposed to beginning here, where the history of humanity begins in Africa. And this timeline is critical, because what this timeline does is expose who is responsible for every phase of knowledge as time progressed and who copied. There's some very important dates on this timeline that I want you to remember. We already talked about the origins of humanity in Africa for over 200,000 years ago. Now I want you to look at this 900 BC. 900 BC is around the time that the Greeks, who are the oldest of the Europeans, come out of their dark ages. All of the history that we have been studying for the past 3 classes has been before this period. Pharaonic Kemet, Pharaonic Egypt, pre-dynastic, you're looking at 10,500 BC. You see the establishment of the religion as far back as 17,000 BC in places like Kirta and Sina, which you saw in our last video with Immortal Egypt and Joanne Fletcher from York University. So I say this to you guys, and I want you to think about this real seriously. Why has there been such conspiracy in hiding human history? The answer is very simple. Racism. The idea that European people are superior to every other person on the planet is their justification for their domination of other people. It is their justification for wanting to rule over other people. It is this whole idea that before the Europeans came onto the scene, the rest of the world was in darkness. This is the narrative of history that the current group of Europeans have pushed forward for over 400 years. Okay? When we talk about racism, and all you thinking people out there following me, if you're not following me, let me know. But racism, the foundation of racism, the roots of racism is the false narrative that white people are superior to everybody else, that everyone else did nothing with their land. They weren't industrious. They weren't religious. They were just out here doing whatever. And the Europeans came with religion. The Europeans came with enlightenment. And the Europeans brought all of the tools of civilization to the table for the rest of us to enjoy. That is the foundation of racism. The only way to destroy something is to destroy it at its foundation, is to destroy it at its roots. So what we're doing here with the Missing Pages of World History lecture series is we are destroying racism from its roots. And that is the false propaganda. That is all the lies about history. Because the reality is, like I pointed out, while I showed you guys a clip with Dr. John Henry Clarke himself, the problem is that if you shared the rest of this history with the world, there is absolutely no way under the sun can you promote a philosophy of white supremacy. It sounds absolutely laughable. When I have discussions with white historians, white philosophers, the one thing always rings true. I know all of their history. They don't know any about history. They don't know any about history. The smartest of the smart of Europeans sincerely think that all of civilization's pioneering feats belong to the Europeans and Europeans exclusively, because that's what they have been taught. That is what you have been taught. And all of those things are flat out lies. When we go through the timeline, all you're seeing are Black and brown people, Black and brown people. We shared art, the rock art, on the walls of all throughout Africa. And what you saw were many of the skills that were later translated into the civilization of ancient Kemet. I used to marvel at the paint that's still outside on the monuments and temples in ancient Kemet. And I used to attribute all of that technology, that skill set, to the ancient Egyptians, until I started studying history from the origins of humanity. And I began to see, well, dang, you had people who knew how to create this type of pigment, this paint, way before the Egyptians. The Egyptians didn't do this. We learned that the early worship of the cow came from, and the development of the goddess Haftar, who is modeled after the cow. And we understand that this worship came from the sacred place that the cow ended up holding in Kemetic life, in life in the Nile Valley. The cow was that important. So when they begin to think about gods and things like that, they married all of these properties of the cow with human properties. And this is how you get the birth of the goddess Hathor, who's one of the major gods throughout the ancient Kemetic pantheon. So I say all this to say that the civilizations of ancient Kemet, the civilizations of Nubia, all of the monuments and the things that you see, if you don't study history prior to when this happened, it is very easy for you to also believe that African people ain't do this. Some mythical Mediterranean people did it who no longer exist on this earth. Because if they did exist on this earth and they were African, they would still be doing superior African stuff to that level right now today, right? And we know that that is false. And I share with you an example of Black Wall Street, which we all know about. Here, all of the Black people from Greenwood section of Tulsa, Black Wall Street, weren't massacred. But the level of terror that they experienced crushed their hopes and desires for trying to replicate that level of success within such an hostile environment. So when we think about history, when we think about people, ancient Egyptians, the people from ancient Kemet, these Black African people, I want us to take it out of the sky and bring it back to earth. Understanding that the knowledge that was put forth or that was displayed, exemplified during Pharaonic Kemet, during early Nubia, this knowledge came from all areas of the continent of Africa. This knowledge came from people in the interior. This knowledge came from people in the West, the South. If you get on the Nile and stay on the Nile, it would lead you to Egypt, to the Nile Valley. That is where the Nile flows into the Mediterranean. So the Nile River and all of its attributes, the fact that the richest silk from the Nile spills out in the Nile Delta, which is Egypt and to a lesser extent, Sudan, this is where you get an abundance of agriculture. And remember, the Sahara Desert was not always a desert. It was a savanna grassland, and climatic changes caused it to form into desert land as we know of it today. So as that land began to dry up, naturally, people who settled in that land and other places began to drift to places that were more prosperous, environments that were more prosperous. And that was ancient Egypt. The land of Egypt is so fertile that it was the only way that the Romans could successfully take over North Africa and move into the Levant. And that was because it became the breadbasket for the Roman army. It was able to feed an army. Okay? So this is the land of Africa. It is the land of plenty. Right here, you're looking at the Davis giraffes in Niger. And once again, you see examples of the type of skill that you see refined to a higher level in ancient Kemet.
The two giraffes, one large male in front of the smaller female, were engraved side by side on the sandstone's weathered surface. The larger of the two is over 18 feet tall, combining several techniques, including scraping, smoothing, and deep engraving of the outlines. Jean Clot estimated the age of the petroglyphs to be between 7,000 and 10,000 years old.
I wanted to show you that just more affirmation that the foundation of the most advanced society the world has ever seen, the most advanced civilization the world has ever seen, all of the kernels of knowledge was already developed, already developed. And what is fascinating about it all is that this knowledge is not developed and controlled by a select group of people, but this knowledge and this philosophy is cultivated over time. So you're talking about these petroglyphs being around 10,000 to 7,000 BC. We get pre-dynastic ancient Nubia and Kemet, 10,500 BC. And once again, let's go back to this timeline. This is when the Greeks come out of their dark ages. And we're talking about 10,500 BC compared to 900 BC. So when you talk about civilization, when you talk about human beings, Europeans are the youngest members of the human family. African people are the oldest members of the human family. To suggest that the youngest members of the human family, the babies of the family, are actually the ones who had the adults, that is what you're saying when you say that Western civilization is the point of clarity, the moment in history when the civilization that we know of, the greatest civilizations, emerged. That is absolutely absurd, people. Absolutely absurd. So, in order to sell this huge lie of white supremacy, in order to sell a philosophy of racism, it is absolutely necessary that you remove the part of history that clearly shows that you're not superior to anyone, that clearly shows that what you said you created was created by someone else. Now, every single thing that I'm teaching you, every single thing that I'm saying to you is empirical data backed. You can take this to any school, any college, any white historian, anthropologist, archaeologist, whoever. And none of them will refute these dates at all, at all. So if we know that the greatest civilization ever known to man was on the continent of Africa, how is it that it's not African people that did it? On the continent of Africa, but it's not done by African people. When you look at the images from ancient Kemet, people will show you how these people look. The image that you have here, these are Nubians from the tomb of Huey. And this is during the time of King Tut in around 1300 or so BC. And I want you to see the different shades of black and brown that Black people painted themselves. We were a variety of different colors. So for us to have images like this that still survive, that are still painted just like this in tombs in Africa, to allow someone to dispossess us of our history is one of the biggest sins that you could do. It's one of the biggest sins, to erase someone's history and tell them that they were nothing before you. And here in one image, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. You're talking, this is maybe 1370 BC or so. And the oldest of their group comes out of their dark ages in 900 BC. meaning that before 900 BC, there was no civilizing done in Europe whatsoever. There was no literacy. There were no major cities. There were no dynasties. There was nothing. And here you have, these are women paying tribute. These are Nubians paying tribute. And look how finely clothed and dressed they were. You'll hear white Egyptologists say that the Nubians and the ancient Egyptians were separate people. They were warring, always at war with each other, so on and so forth. And they say this to once again try to distinguish Nubians and sub-Saharan Africa from Egypt, to make it appear as though the people from Egypt came to Egypt from somewhere other than Africa, that they were not African people, even though they painted themselves how they looked. Okay. 900 BC, Europeans come out of their dark ages. And here by 900 BC, Africans had experienced over 3,000 years of rule and established the greatest civilization ever known to man. Today, no one knows how the pyramids were created. No one knows how the mega statues were created, the megaliths like the Sphinx. No one really knows the techniques. So they say that because no one knows, African people, you didn't do it. White people, we don't know it. Mediterranean people, they don't know it. Asian people, they don't know it. So these people couldn't have been you. If they were you, you'd have this knowledge, you'd have this technology. People, please don't listen to crazy stuff like that. I lived in New York and I invested in brownstones. The technology for creating the plaster molds and all of those things and those old brownstones has been lost. Because of new technology, old knowledge is lost all the time. Let me give you an example. Before the calculator, we had to learn a lot of mathematics. Once the calculator came, look how much math we no longer needed to have to learn. Look at fire. How many of us can make fire? That was the most important skill any human being could have possessed in the world. And the average human being today has lost that knowledge to be able to make fire. So knowledge is lost all the time for a variety of reasons. George Washington Carver destroyed all his work before he died so that his oppressors wouldn't come, steal all his ideas, and profit off of his ideas. So this whole idea of knowledge not being translated or transferred to another group of people, and that being a reason to say that you did not create that civilization, is absolutely absurd. Okay. Now, I want to go into spirituality, because this is the other immensely important element that African people brought to the world. Almost every single individual I know ascribes to some religion. Almost everyone. But here's the reality. Before African people, there was no gods. African people created the God concept. Before these religious concepts, before these spiritual concepts, before the whole idea of paying reverence or honoring or praying, all of these ideas generated in Africa. And when you think of it from a common sense perspective, who else would have a reason to honor and pray to something benevolent, something greater than them? Would it be people who are living on the ice, to which nature is unkind to human beings? You can't grow anything out of the ground because it's frozen. There's scant herd animals because there's not enough food and vegetation to feed them. The rivers are frozen cold and perilous. You slip in them, you could die. You're living in caves. That is not an environment that will produce someone who feels blessed. It's not an environment that's going to produce someone who's going to want to honor a God. It is African people who were blessed by the environment that they were given, were blessed by the Nile, blessed by all of the herd animals, all of the fruits and vegetables. They felt thankful. They began to see that life was bigger than a human being. They began to make connections with the moon, the stars, and things that happened on the ground. And they did so first out of pure survival. If you're going to depend upon the flooding of a river in order to irrigate crops that's going to feed tens of thousands of people, you need to have a way of being certain. Otherwise, you're going to miss that critical moment in the harvesting or the planting, and you're going to starve. Everyone's going to starve. So this whole idea of studying the stars, this was a physical necessity. We now know today that the moon controls the currents of the seas. We know the effect that the sun has on life, and the same as the people in ancient Kemet, the same as ancient Africans. So they sought out to understand these phenomena in a greater way so as to be able to control these forces to the greater good of humanity. When you saw in Immortal Egypt, episode 1, the beginnings of the worshiping of the cow, because the cow was so significant, Hathor becomes the human representation of that cow. This is the whole beginning of animism. And what's so unique about this, and what is so powerful about this, is that these people, these African people, were striving to be in balance and harmony on all levels. They didn't have to do that. What drove them to do that? We know that ancient Kemet was founded by Menes, but we know that there were other civilizations that were thriving before two were merged. The philosophy, the religious philosophy of ancient Kemet was organic. It did not come from pharaohs. It did not come from a group of powerful people who sat and contrived a philosophy that will exploit people to their benefit. That is not how the 42 laws of Mayat were derived. Okay. Now, this is the oldest religious text there is. Religion is so great in our world. How is it that people are not taught the 42 laws of Mayat? This preceded the 10 Commandments by literally thousands of years. For those of you who don't know what the 42 laws of Mayat, Mayat is the ancient Kemetic Egyptian concept of truth, balance, order, law, morality, and justice. Mayat is represented as a goddess with wings. What is a white angel? What's a Christian angel? A white woman with wings. She is a symbol of the moral and carnal laws of ancient Kemet and one of the most important of all the gods. She put order to the universe at the time of creation and is responsible for regulating the stars, seasons, and the actions of both mortals and deities. Through the 42 laws of Ma'at, she provides the moral and ethical guidelines in which all citizens of Kemet were to follow in order to achieve rebirth in the afterlife. This whole concept of being born again, this is African. The foundation of Christianity, what our spiritual leader, Dr. Ray Hagins, teaches us every week, is ancient Kemet. This is the foundation of Christianity. Ma'at put order to the universe at the time of creation and is responsible for regulating the stars, seasons, and the actions of both mortals and deities. Through the 42 laws of Ma'at, she provides the moral and ethical guidelines in which all citizens of Kemet were to follow in order to achieve rebirth in the afterlife. Aside from her role in creation, Ma'at played a critical role in the weighing of the soul that took place in the Duat, or the underworld. In order to achieve reincarnation, one soul had to be as light as a feather after reciting the 42 laws of Ma'at. Here is an image of that scene. Here is the scale of life, and here is the feather of Ma'at, and here is the heart. Okay, you have Anubis here, writing or tallying all of this, and the idea is that your heart is going to be as light as a feather, meaning that you honored Ma'at in your lifetime. You honored the 42 laws, and you're now going to be reincarnated. Okay, so this whole idea. Here's another image. Here's the ancient Egyptian image of Isis suckling, Horus suckling Isis. And then you have revisionists. And this is why, once again, it is absolutely critical to study history from the origins of humanity in chronological order. This period here, 900 BC, this is when the Greeks, the oldest of the Europeans, begin to come out of the Dark Ages. Now, when we talk about Jesus Christ, because we're talking about religion now, this is when Jesus Christ is said to have walked the earth, 33 to 30 BC. Okay? Now, the 42 laws of Ma'at, you're at 5,000 BC. So you're talking about the foundation of Christianity being found in Africa 5,000 years before Jesus Christ is said to have walked on earth. And here we are, Black people, African people, the people who created religion, the people who created the gods and goddesses that the Greeks created their gods and goddesses from. This is our history, our legacy. And someone stole this from us, started world history with their civilization, with European civilization, and got all of us following European religions, following Asiatic religions, following Arabic religions, when the foundation of all of those religions came from African people. The Book of the Dead, I know a lot of you've heard of that. What the Book of the Dead essentially is 42 laws of Ma'at, a bunch of prayers, which white people call spells, that were to help guide one through the underworld so that they could safely be reincarnated. That was the Book of the Dead. They call it the Book of the Dead because all of the sarcophagi that they dug up and opened had copies of this religious text. And this lets you know how deeply the people believed in this spiritual concept of Ma'at. It is written everywhere. Every single human being, both male and female. And this is a philosophy that African people developed together. And it was based on the common shared life and cultural experiences that they were having. It was not created by one person. And as you begin to study it, it all makes sense. Okay? I'm going to read to you the 42 laws of Ma'at. And I want you also to understand this is 42 laws. You had to say this, recite this in the morning and at night. And I challenge you to do that for 1 week. Get up in the morning, read the 42 laws of Ma'at, recite the 42 laws of Ma'at, in the morning and at night, and tell me how you feel after a week. Here we go. I have not committed sin. I have not committed robbery with violence. I have not stolen. I have not slain men or women. I have not stolen food. I have not swindled offerings. I have not stolen from God or goddess. I have not told lies. I have not carried away food. I have not cursed. I have not closed my ears to truth. I have not committed adultery. I have not made anyone cry. I have not felt sorrow without reason. I have not assaulted anyone. I am not deceitful. I have not stolen anyone's land. I have not been an eavesdropper. I have not falsely accused anyone. I have not been angry without reason. I have not seduced anyone's wife. I have not polluted myself. I have not terrorized anyone. I have not disobeyed the law. I have not been exclusively angry. I have not cursed God or goddess. I have not behaved with violence. I have not caused disruption of peace. I have not acted hastily or without thought. I have not overstepped my boundaries of concern. I have not exaggerated my words when speaking. I have not worked evil. I have not used evil thoughts, words, or deeds. I have not polluted the water. I have not spoken angrily or arrogantly. I have not cursed anyone in thought, word, or deeds. I have not placed myself on a pedestal. I have not stolen what belongs to God, goddess. I have not stolen from or disrespected the deceased. I have not taken from food from a child. I have not acted with insolence. I have not destroyed property belonging to God or goddess. Now, if everyone is waking up reciting this, going to bed reciting this, moving very, very carefully to honor all of these things, this does not lead to a despotic, warring, imperialistic people. There is absolutely no way you can uphold these values and be evil. There is no way that you can uphold these values and then someone tells you to go out and take someone else's land, use lies and trickery to deceive them of their property. That is against African philosophy. And this is core African philosophy. I just told you they called it the Book of the Dead because it was found in everybody's sarcophagus. I don't care if you were a rich member of the royal family, a priest, or a commoner. Everyone believed this. I ask you, what was people in other civilizations using as their moral compass? What document? This is a worldview. Religion is a worldview. Religion is part of culture. Every aspect of African society was religious in nature. With all of the money that the pharaohs and the priesthood received, what did they do with it? They built temples. They built monuments to honor gods and goddesses. Could they have exploited and polluted the water? Could they have polluted the planet? Would that have gone on with the people? That was not Ma'at. We're talking about a people in a land of plenty. And even when we get down to 5,000 BC, when now you got millions of people in this area, very densely populated area, you still have order. You do not have people killing each other, unable to cooperate, unable to share. This is not what you're getting. You don't get that when everyone is striving and sincerely believes that I have to observe these 42 laws and principles in order to be reincarnated. They believed it so much that they spent a large part of their life preparing for their afterlife. They spent tons of money creating tombs to receive them in their afterlife. That's how much they believed it. In the same way, you have Christians or Muslims or other people believe in their religion so much they leave their whole estate to the religion. It is no different. It is no different. When you talk about African people being emotional people, being spiritual people, that is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Europeans would like you to believe that if African people were in the had the same level of power that Europeans had, that they would exploit, be imperialistic, and everything just like what the Europeans did. That's not the case. That's not the truth. The truth is African people, Kemet was the most powerful civilization on planet Earth for a very long time, way more than 400 years. And with them having the level of power and wealth, ingenuity, technology, we know that they left the continent of Africa. We know that they went to the Western Hemisphere. We know that they visited other people. But did they do what Columbus did? Did they do what the Europeans did when they stepped foot out of Africa? Did they go and colonize the rest of the world? Did they go and tear down other people's culture? Did they go and tear down other people's worldview? Is this what Africans did? The answer is no. The answer is no. African people have always been guided and ruled by spirituality. This is absolutely critical. And it is so critical because religion controls so much of people's minds today in the same way that it did thousands of years ago. When people from the Middle East, when the Greeks and other people, the Phoenicians, came into Africa and they began to see the civilization that these Black African people built and marveled at this civilization, don't you think they saw this religious iconography everywhere? There is nothing that you can view from ancient Kemet that doesn't have any religious symbolism on it. There's nothing. The hieroglyphs themselves are the words of the gods. So here you have non-African people coming into Africa, witnessing Black African people in the most advanced civilization imaginable. And they see that all of these people are being ruled by this spirituality. They see that the Pharaoh all the way down are ruled by this spirituality. That's power. That's power. So when a person who isn't honorable sees the power in this religion, see the power in the mind control of this religion, they say, man, why don't I create my own religion and have people worship me like this? I can create my own religion and can control people's minds in the same way that these black pharaohs doing it. What gives them the monopoly on creating their own religion? Now, look how many versions of religion there are out there. Even you look at Christianity. How many different sects of Christianity are there? You can't even count them all. You got Scientologists, one of the new sects. And it's one of the wealthiest sects of Christianity in the world. Why are all governments concerned with religion? Why is religion such a powerful and dominant force on this planet? The reason is pure and simple. Religion controls minds. And the people at power want to control minds. But they don't want to control minds for altruistic purposes. They want to control minds so that they can dominate and take the best that the earth has to offer for themselves at the expense of everybody else. And to parade around the world and to viciously steal somebody's history, to viciously tell people that those great people who built those pyramids, who built those statues, who built all of those monuments, who pioneered all of those different genres of knowledge, those, of course, you know they weren't you, you stupid fool. How could they be you? And we believe it. We allow people to start history for our children with Western civilization. We allow our enemies to start our history with American history. The foundation of America is a shameful illustration of humans interacting with another group of human beings. It's shameful. Why would I want to tie my history up with that? Why would I want to be tied up with one of the most shameful epics in world history? Every last one of you listening to this know everything there is to know about slavery. You was a slave, you was a slave, you was a slave, you was a slave, you was a slave. And we somehow think that Hollywood is giving us a nod when they bankroll slavery movies. Hollywood continuously bankrolls slavery movies because they want you to always locate your history at slavery. Slavery, think you a slave, 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 slave. Let's look at this timeline. When you talk about the transatlantic slave trade, when you talk about all of this, you're talking about 300 to 400 years. You're talking 300 to 400 years. You compare that to literally over 200,000 of years of human history. You compare that to ancient Kemet, pre-dynastic from 10,500 BC, and the last Black Africans, the 25th dynasty, ruled at 653 BC. And you're gonna keep pushing my history here? You're gonna keep my history here? You're gonna keep my history here? Every aspect of my history is here? And then when you start discussing Western world history, you begin it here with the ancient Greeks? And then claim that the ancient Greeks were responsible for all of the things that these people created. I showed you the step pyramid of Djoser, 2600 BC. And you begin to see the columns of the Colosseum. And that architecture is being attributed to the Greeks, Roman Corinthian posts and columns. When all of those columns, all of that architecture, all of that stuff was designed thousands of years before the oldest of the Europeans came out of their dark ages. This is fact. So if I'm showing you fact, if I'm showing you that world history begins hundreds of thousands of years before the youngest members of the human race, white people, came out of their dark ages, how on earth can these white people be responsible for all of human knowledge? It is absolutely absurd. It is absolutely ridiculous. And the most liberal white person that you know can't accept this. The most liberal white person that you know is afraid to tackle this history. And the reason is because they are comfortable in feeling that they are superior. And they need to feel that they're superior in some sense because they have to grapple with all of what slavery meant for their souls. You have to justify enslaving African people. You have to justify selling people's babies. You have to justify whipping grown men, raping women. You have to justify all of these things. You have to justify them to your children. How do you justify all of this vicious stuff that your people did to other people? You got to clean it up. You got to clean it up. You cannot let the world know and your children know that they got all of this stuff the way they got it. When people who were involved in the slave trade died, in their obituaries, they didn't say they were part of the slave trade. They were businessmen. This whole idea of history being stolen from us, it is at the crux of racism, is at the crux of white supremacy. It is the only way to defeat white supremacy. It is the only way to destroy racism, and that is to expose the lies upon which racism rests. That is it. Because at the end of the day, when you're fighting white people, you're fighting an ideology. You're not fighting white people. All white people don't subscribe to the ideology of white supremacy and of racism. So that is what we're fighting. We're fighting the ideology of racism. We're fighting the ideology of white supremacy here. How do you fight the ideology of white supremacy? How do you fight the ideology of racism? How do you destroy these concepts? You destroy these concepts by exposing what they hid in order to make you believe that those concepts had any validity. Just this image alone. You're talking 4 centuries before the Greeks come out of their dark ages. And this is how African people appear. Look at the jewelry, look at the clothing. And I've been waiting for someone white or a dissenter to come on to the channel and to challenge any of the stuff that I'm putting in front of you. Anybody who's teaching you anything differently, invite them on. Ask them to present their documentation. The beauty about our documentation is that this stuff is on papyri. This stuff is written on the walls in pyramids. You can see it. It's inscripted in stone, in granite, in sandstone. You can see it, you can read it. And they wrote on everything. They wrote on the ceilings. They painted on the ceilings. And then they tell you about the Italian Renaissance and about Michelangelo painting on the ceilings, and you're in awe. You're in awe. But they don't tell you people, your people's painting on ceilings thousands of years before this man. And how did your people get up to that high to be able to paint that ceiling? The Missing Pages of World History lecture series. This lecture series is here to expose racism because it is time for it to go. And I challenge every white person I know, anybody I know, if you really want to get rid of racism, all you have to do is to study all of the history that the racists sought to hide to prove that they are superior. That's all you have to do. Will white people study this? Are white people ready to accept the fact that it is truly African people that they owe all of their knowledge to, that the world owes so much knowledge to, that the world owes spirituality to, which one can argue to be one of the greatest facets of human existence? All of that goes back to African people. If all of this stuff goes back to African people, how again are you going to tell me you're superior? How again are you going to tell me that? All you have shown me is that you are the most destructive. All you have shown me is that you are the most evil. You haven't shown me any enlightenment. You shown me destruction. Everywhere that the Europeans went, they took the light out. Everywhere they went, they destroyed culture. Everywhere they went, they made it worse off for the people who were there originally. And here we are in 2022, trying to become honorary Europeans. You have some Black people know European history better than Europeans, but couldn't tell you an ounce of their own history. Out of all the Black people I know in America, less than 10% know our true history. Even my friends. And I say to myself, what kind of world can you be living in if you don't know this history in a Black person? What could be going on in your mind? And then I begin to understand how there's so much mental illness amongst Black people right now. I understand why there's so much violence amongst Black people right now. We've been at war with an invisible enemy and a physical enemy. The only way for us to return to a sense of balance, in order for us to regain power, we have to first regain control of our minds. You cannot become powerful when someone else controls your mind. You can't do it. If you don't know your own history, if you truly don't know how great African people are, you're going to say some real ignorant things out of your mouth. You're going to say things that make it harder for Black people to unite. You're going to say things like, Black people, we can't do nothing together. Anytime Black people try to unite, this happened, this Black person, all of that's talk. That's because you don't know this. That's because you don't know your history and you don't know that our history was disrupted. Our worldview was removed and replaced with a European worldview. They tried to literally steal our minds and implant their worldview into our brains so that they can rule and control us while we are willing. My sole purpose in life is to destroy this whole concept of racism. It's to destroy this whole notion of white supremacy. Because it is the most ridiculous assumption that I ever heard of. I don't see brilliance. I see chaos in this civilization. When you have regular citizens walking around with weapons of mass destruction, can have as many guns, bullets as you can purchase. You have as many people with mental illness having access to high-level military training and all of these things. Is that enlightenment? Is this civilization, is this European civilization that in 100 years has put the entire earth on life support? Is this what you want to assimilate into? Because on the one hand, I hear us say that this ideology is destructive, white people destructive, but then we mimic them to a T. All of our systems are mimics of their systems. And the crazy thing about it is that they stole all of our systems and corrupted them. And we have embraced the corruption of our own knowledge because we don't know the foundation of our own knowledge. You used to be a little Black child. When you was that little Black child and you went to school, did you read about powerful things your people did? Were you taught anything about ancient Egypt? Were you shown any of the photographs of your people? Look at these images. This is one of the funerary masks of Pharaoh King Tut, 1332, 1323. This is Ptolemy the first Greek ruler of ancient Egypt. Okay, Alexander the Great conquered in 323 BC, and Ptolemy the One declared himself a pharaoh in 305 BC. Look at the imitation and look at the original. Look at the imitation and look at the original. How can a European possibly say that the Greeks were not influenced by the Egyptians when this is the first Greek ruler of Kemet and this is the statue? They knew that their religion and their culture was inferior to that of the African. Therefore, they didn't try to bring their culture to Egypt. They tried to install themselves as legitimate pharaohs. What does that say? This is 1,000 years apart. When we look at the ancient people of Kemet, how they depicted themselves, this is what we see. I just had an argument with a white guy online about the whole topic of the people from ancient Egypt being Black Africans. And I gave this as an example of how the people from Egypt and the people from Nubia were a blended culture, a blended family, a blended culture, and they were both Black African people. This is Kemset. This is the royal wife of Mentuhotep II. Mentuhotep II is the founder of the Middle Kingdom. As you can see here, this is a Nubian woman, and she's being attended to by light-skinned women who would have probably been from Phoenicia or somewhere like that. The whole idea that African people were inferior to non-African people during the time of ancient Egyptians was so absurd. For us to be here in 2023 trying to fight this ideology, I know these people are turning over on their grave. They said that Africans had no clothes. I challenge any of you to look up the dates of this image, way before the Greeks come out of their dark ages. Look at the level of civilization. Look at the level of order. Somebody can take images of people that look just like you and convince you that you are not these people. I mean, that's a propaganda job for you. And this is one of my all-time favorites. This is Pharaoh Huni of the Third Dynasty, Old Kingdom. If this is not a Black African, and for a white person to look me in my face and tell me that this is not a Black African person, I mean, I just have no words. I have no words. You talk about travel. You saw how early African people were boat building. You saw how early they had sails. You saw how early they had oars. And all throughout, you see cooperation between Black people. You see peace amongst Black people. You see royalty. And look at the clothes. Once again, everything that you're seeing is before the ancient Greeks. Everything you're seeing is before any European did anything. How do you explain this? They'll tell you, what is it? UFOs came down and created and left. They'll tell you that the ancient Egyptians painted themselves reddish pink. That's what they tell you. And everything that I'm showing you, challenge any of it. Challenge any of it. This is the larger image of what you've been seeing from the tomb of Hui. And this is Nubians giving tribute, paying tribute to the Pharaoh, King Tut. And look how exquisitely they're dressed. This is on the wall right now. So they painted themselves reddish pink. They were European. They were light-skinned people. I mean, this is the reality. Why won't they show it? Why won't they teach it? If they begin to teach this on a mass scale, who would think that white people are superior? Who would want to be ruled by white people? Nobody. So you got to keep this hidden, even in 2022, as you claim you want to get rid of racism. The most nicest white person you know is not trying to get rid of no racism. I'm here to tell you that right now. I'm here to tell you that right now. And I have some white friends I love. They not trying to battle this. Because it does for them what racism has done to us. To learn that not only are you not superior to these people, but you learned everything that you knew that was good from these people, and you corrupted it and you used it to go and kill all non-Europeans, exterminate them, take what they got, take their land, and then justify it by saying that these people contribute nothing to the world. They needed to be enlightened. They were squandering their resources. You can't take that. This is why they won't teach, even though they know that the only way to destroy racism is to tell the truth that all of that stuff that we said about African people, we lied. And in fact, we learned all the stuff that we learned from African people. We used it against them. We corrupted it and took over the world with it. What people gonna teach this about themselves? Because to destroy racism, that's what it means. It means that you're gonna have to teach this about who you are and what you did. The most sincerest white person is not ready for that reckoning. You got a few like Jane Elliott who can confront white racism as it is, but very few, very few. Because you have to do a 180. You have to go from believing that you're superior to understanding that your people did the most scoundrelly stuff ever in world history, that your people did the most shameful stuff to people in world history, that your people did stuff to people that is unspeakable, that your people exterminated whole groups of human beings, exterminated. They're not here no more. You got to learn that your people systematically tried to steal somebody else's history and use all of these lies to enslave them and keep them enslaved and then discriminate against them. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. Who is willing to teach that to them, to their children? Who is willing to say openly and put in the curriculum that this is what we did to the whole world? Because that's the only way that we can get rid of racism, is that you got to tell the truth. You have to tell the truth. The truth is right in front of your face. Empirical data is right here. Can't do it. Can't do it. The same guy who I was arguing with about the Nubians and the Egyptians being the same people, given the example of Kemset, he responded online. Kemset was just one of Mentuhotep II's wives. Pharaohs had many wives. Like, we didn't know that, right? But once again, so I said, all right, let me give you one better. Let me give you Queen T. This is Queen T. This is the grandmother of King Tut. This is the mother of Akhenaten, this who was the husband of Nefertiti, okay? Now, we have her DNA. That was taken in 2012. She's a Nubian. Cannot disregard this whatsoever. This is their bloodline. This is the King Tut bloodline. Geographical analysis of the Amarna mummies was performed using their autosomal STR profiles based on 8 tested loci. Results are summarized in Table 1 and illustrated in Figure 1. Maps for individual Amarna mummies are included in Figures 2 to 8 in the appendix. Okay. Average MLI scores in Table 1 indicate the STR profiles of the Amarna mummies would be most frequent in present-day populations of several African regions, including the Southern African, African Great Lakes, tropical West African regions, okay? This is Thuya. This is her father. Yuya is her mother. This is KV35L, the elder lady. This is her grave marked in the Valley of the Kings. This is Queen T. This is her husband, Pharaoh Amenhotep III. This KV55 is Akhenaten. KV35YL, the younger lady, was determined to be Nefertiti, and this is King Tut. So this is the royal family line of King Tut, okay? His grandmother is 100% Nubian, not of royal lineage. So if a pharaoh of Egypt, Amenhotep III, is going to marry a Nubian, have a child with the Nubian, and the child becomes the pharaoh, how can you begin to say that the people of ancient Egypt and the people of Nubia were separate and distinct people that had no cultural connections other than sharing a geographical space? It's absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. And all of the data that you see here is in the Education for Life Academy, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, Teach and Learn curriculum. And I put this together so that when you're speaking about these things, you got the evidence at your hand, because they're going to try to make you think you're crazy. They'll tell you to look at this color blue, and say, no, it's not blue, it's purple. And fail you on the test if you said blue. This is how this is working. I'm going to end the lecture here. We're at 9:20, and I want to open it up for any questions, any comments, anything that was said in the chat that may need to be read or anything like that.
I have a question and observations about the Kahamu.
Okay, let me pull you up.
You won't see me good.
Okay.
You'll hear me. When you pointed out the DNA just now, thought came to me that it's possibly there's some individuals who are alive today with that DNA is connected to them ancestrally.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Yes. And, we have to use the things that I have at disposal with you just today. And we can go even further. I'm quite sure.
No doubt. But if we're walking around copying Europeans, if we're walking around using European models, how are we ever going to return to the genius of the African if that genius is blocked? If all of that knowledge is blocked, we're not tapping into any of that knowledge. If the only knowledge that we're receiving is knowledge based on a European worldview, how are we ever going to recapture the knowledge that put forth the grandest civilization ever known to man? You cannot do it.
Not do it.
It's not, no, it is not meant for African. And I'm glad you brought that up about the DNA, because I tell African people all the time, just think about this. When the 20 million African people were viciously taken from the continent of Africa and brought to the New World, when they had babies, they passed that African stock on to that baby. That baby survived. That baby passed their DNA on to the next baby, to the next baby, to the next baby, till it gets to you. There is an untapped line of DNA that spans from all of these great African people that still flows through African people.
I see.
We still have the capabilities of tapping into this knowledge, but our inspiration can't be European systems.
That's right.
How are you going to become a great African thinking like a European, using a European system, using a system that none of their systems can replicate the knowledge that we put forth in ancient Kemet? None of their systems. So if you know that none of their systems can replicate any of that knowledge, why are we relying upon their systems to propel us forward? Why? It makes no sense. If any other group of people on this planet could claim that the people of ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet belong to their ancestor group, every element of their society will be based on that. Every element of their society. You hear about it, hear about it, hear about it, hear about it. Okay? Even the government of Egypt can't lay claim to Egyptian history. The Arab government of Egypt can't lay claim to that history. They gotta get with the other Egyptologists and try to claim that these aren't Black Africans. That's the best that they can do, but they can't even claim it. This is our history. This is our legacy. I'm imploring all of you to stay with us, continue on the journey of self-discovery. Share this with your children. I have probably the most extensive online bank of images from ancient Kemet in a bunch of slideshows. Pictures speak 1,000 words. Even with the DNA, this DNA analysis came out in 2012. If that DNA came to say that King Tut DNA was from anywhere other than Africa, you would have heard that the world over. Let me just share with you the locations once again where the DNA from. You see these yellow points? Map of average regional match likelihood MLI scores for the Amarna mummies. You see this? Nowhere near. This is South Africa. And Black people didn't do this, do these statistics, this DNA analysis. You can't escape it. You can't escape it. So if anyone tells you in an argument that the people of ancient Kemet, the people, the pharaohs of ancient Egypt were not Black African, refer them to DNA Tribe's DNA analysis from January 1st, 2012. Refer them to DNA and see what they got to say. See how far their argument go. Show them the image of Queen T. Okay. If a person can look you, and I'm gonna go to Wikipedia for you. Who is the grandmother of King Tut? What do you guys see? This is Wikipedia. This is her right now. This is in a museum in Berlin. If this is your grandma, how do you look? Look at her crown. You would think that this is from contemporary Africa.
Right.
What is the time period of this? Let me show you. 1398 BC to 1338 BC. So when you talk about the whole concept of royalty itself, there were no kings and queens before Africa. We invented the king and queen. We invented the monarchy. And they told you the best that you could do is create a tribe. People, we have been bamboozled, hoodwinked, all of that stuff Brother Malcolm said, and more. And the sad thing about it is that I studied this in college and ain't getting none of this. Every thing, I went to the University of Virginia, Cornell University, majored in African-American studies and history, double in University of Virginia, Africana studies at Cornell. I ain't learned none of this. I didn't even have to take a course on none of African history to graduate with a degree from the University of Virginia in history. Not having to take one course in African history when all of humanity began in Africa. What does that say to you people?
They want to keep it hidden.
They want to keep it hidden. Why do you want to keep it hidden? If you did not, you cannot sell inferiority. You can't sell white supremacy. And in fact, when all of this gets exposed, what it means now that your justification for exterminating whole groups of human beings, enslaving whole groups of human beings and their children for centuries was based on a lie. Was based on a lie that you were superior when you knew that it was a lie. And you knew it was a lie because you carefully hid all of this other knowledge. We didn't hide this from ourselves. We didn't hide this from ourselves. They hid this from us. So then just imagine in 2022, a white person standing up admitting, you know what? Racism is based on the lies that African people contributed nothing to world history, that Africa was in the dark too, Europeans came and brought the light with Christianity and all of those things. That was a lie. In fact, African people invented spirituality, and the spirituality that they invented was the most cleanest, purest form of spirituality that ever existed in the world today. They can't tell you that. Because what would that mean for everything else now? How would they feel about themselves? How would their children feel about themselves? They're not ready to thrust that on to their people. Telling the truth could possibly mean destruction for their people in their minds. So they would rather continue to perpetuate the lie and act like they want to get rid of racism. You know, I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. You know how to get rid of racism. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. So whenever you're talking to a white person about racism, all of that, just tell them, tell the truth. Tell the truth. You can't do it. African people had wealth and power, went all over the world, had all forms of knowledge. We didn't go to Europe and conquer European people and make them submit to us and worship under us and enslave them. We could. We didn't do that. We didn't go to Asia on a quest to conquer people and bring them back to Africa and make them work for free and kill them. We didn't do that. And we had the power. We are a special people. And that is why we have been so demonized. People are so afraid of us. If we were so inferior, why would you feel the need to tie our hands behind our back all day long in every endeavor? Why would you feel the need to do that? The reality is you are afraid that if everything was equal, you could not compete with us. You couldn't compete. If we're able to accomplish and achieve all the things that we've achieved with so much racism, discrimination, and hatred against us, what do you think we would do if the doors of equality were open? What do you think we would do? Everyone knows that. And that's why everyone joins in the chorus and screaming that the African is the world's problem, as opposed to the African is the world's savior, because that's who we are. And through the Black Achievement Fund, we are here to provide an economic foundation so that we can reinstitute Mayat in this world, in this day, this era, so that we can build a new civilization based on African values that I believe the rest of the world, the thinking world, who's not tied to racism, will want to embrace. Why is it that we feel that the whole world can be under someone else's ideology and not ours? Why is it so normal for the world to be under European ideology? Why is it so normal for the world to be under Asian ideology, but not under an African ideology? We can study socialism, we can study Marxism, we can study democracy, and all of these people. Why can't we study African philosophers, the kings and queens, who started it all? We have to do it on our own. These people are not going to teach you that. And this is the only way for you to become powerful.
Stand up and be not afraid and claim our heritage.
No doubt. And I know it's difficult because so many of us work for them and our livelihood depends on them. And just like during the civil rights movement, you had Blacks who would not go out and register to vote. I'm scared. I don't want these white people to come and burn a cross in my yard. I'm scared. Fear has prevented us from being the best that we can be. We're so scared of them that we've turned all of that unto ourselves. Okay, if you watch the last movie that was done by Chadwick Boseman, I forgot what the name of that movie. Does anyone remember?
I don't remember, but I did see it.
The whole premise of that movie.
Brothers.
Say that, sister. But the whole premise of the movie.
The Five Bloods.
No, it was like, it was based on, I think, an August Wilson play or something like that.
Right.
But the whole concept was that he was so impotent in the face of the white world, white discrimination, that he couldn't, the idea of killing a white person was too foreign. But he turned that anger and hatred and frustration on somebody else in our own race. And you see that a lot of times, okay? It's like the psychologists say, the husband gets beat up at work by the boss, he goes home and beat up the wife beats up the kids beat the dog. But there's nobody there to beat the person at the top who caused the chain reaction. The only way for us to rebuild is we have to have our own money. We have to be able to control institutions. We have to be able to control industries. We have to be able to create wealth that is collectively owned. And that is the mission of the Black Achievement Fund. 10 million Black people and our allies, plus $9 a month, and over $1 billion a year for us to rebuild the world in a humanitarian format. For example, $150 million we allocated to our health department. Having free healthcare. If we buy the building, we pay for all of the hospital equipment and pay the salaries of the doctors and nurses and support staff. When you go into that hospital or health clinic or whatever, why would we need to charge you any money? This is African thinking versus European thinking. This is a better, more humanitarian way of human organization. Better. It's that simple. But in order to be able to embrace a simple concept like this, you have to think like an African person. You cannot think like a European. If you think like a European, it's not going to make sense. It's going to be too complicated. Too complicated. So I say to you all, continue on the path for self-enlightenment. Teach everybody that you know. Share the resources with everybody that you know. If you're a Black Achievement Fund member, you have free access to the curriculum. If you're a non-Black Achievement Fund member, the entire curriculum is $19, $19.99. Okay, you have over 24 ebooks to accompany all of the lectures that you see here. And I make sure that I provide empirical evidence to every single thing that I'm saying, so that when you're in a conversation with someone, you can share the data. And I promise you, they hadn't read none of this stuff. They haven't read it. The only thing they know is Western civilization and beyond. They don't know anything before that, okay? So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's lecture. Thank you for being with me tonight. Make sure you teach yourself, teach your children, and I will see you guys same time for the lecture series, class 5, next Thursday at 8 p.m. Also, make sure that you check us out on Sundays at 2 p.m. on the same platform for our info sessions for the Black Achievement Fund. And if you have not joined the Black Achievement Fund, what are you waiting on? All right, $9, tax deductible, all right? Tax deductible. You don't like what we're doing? Stop giving your money. It's that simple. There's no games, there's no tricks. but this is the only way that I can think of for us to become economically independent instantaneously in this lifetime, so that we can catapult African people back to world power, to the world stage, so that we can begin to influence power politics in a way that can perhaps even save this planet and save humanity. We have that knowledge, but we first must become African people and comfortable in that knowledge to be able to share it with the rest of the world. On that note, I leave you guys. Love you guys. See you guys soon. Peace.
BAF, Brother Akeem, just let them know BAF will be at Wakanda 2 on November 12th, all over in every city and every state. Check us out.
Thank you for mentioning that. So Black Panther 2 is about to come out. And what we're saying here is with Black Achievement Fund, we don't have to go and see a fictional, well, I want to see it, but we can create a Wakanda right here, right now.
Here, Kemet, little Kemet.
Wakanda is actually inspired by ancient Kemet. That's what it is, you know? So just as we can go and share with our family and our friends, this is a reality that we could have, we can make that possible right here, right now, with the knowledge that we got and the wealth that we got. All right, so we'll be sending out some emails to let you guys know where we'll be watching the movie across the country. So for all of you Black Achievement Fund members, if you want to watch it with the Black Achievement Fund family, be sure to check out your emails in the coming weeks. All right. Peace, people.
Chadwick Boseman's movie was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
That's what it was. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen that movie, definitely check it out. It was a very, very powerful performance by Chadwick. Very powerful.
Always.
Yeah. All right, guys. See you guys later.